When we trace the origins of empirical, rational thought, the timeline usually starts in Europe. Historians traditionally credit Enlightenment thinkers like David Hume and Voltaire with establishing a worldview based on evidence rather than faith. But if we travel back 2,600 years to the Magadha plains of ancient India, we find a pervasive school of thought. These were the Charvakas, a group that stood in public squares and openly declared there is no God, no soul, and no afterlife. Despite their widespread influence, tracing their history presents an enormous challenge. They built no temples, ordained no clergy, and left no surviving primary texts. Everything we know about them had to be reverse-engineered from the writings of their enemies. Look at this text translated from Orthodox priests who sought to destroy them. They label the Charvaka as the atheistical school, right before quoting their core philosophy. While life is yours, live joyously. The history of global rationalism does not follow a neat line from Greece to Western Europe. It requires excavating suppressed ideas that manage to survive within the records of their own erasure. The Charvaka worldview relied on a theory of knowledge called pratyaksa, or direct perception. Look at this passage where they outline their epistemology. If a claim cannot be measured or observed with the physical senses, it lacks the status of truth. Applying this evidentiary standard, they evaluated religious authority and priestly rituals, dismissing them as idle words. From there, they developed a purely materialist ontology. They argued that reality is composed of only 4 observable elements: earth, water, fire, and air, rejecting the invisible ether. In their view, consciousness arises when matter combines in a specific way, dispersing completely at death. This observation applied to their cosmology. The universe, they argued, operates entirely on natural laws, a concept called svabhava. They found no evidence for divine will, a cosmic creator, or an invisible system of karma tracking human deeds. Because life is finite and death is absolute, their ethical framework centered on a doctrine called kama. Since there are no posthumous rewards to earn or punishments to fear, they held the moral goal as maximizing joy and minimizing suffering in the one life you actually have. While rivals portrayed them as reckless, the Charvaka had dealt a system of thought based entirely on natural elements and observable laws. This challenged the financial and social control of the religious elite. The Charvakas were part of the Shramana movements, a highly active ecosystem of thinkers, like the Ajavikas and Ajnana, who collectively broke away from Vedic orthodoxy. Physical evidence from this ecosystem is incredibly rare. But in the 9th century, a philosopher named Jayarashi Bhatta authored a manuscript called the Tattvoplavla Simha, leaving us with a surviving text loosely linked to the skeptical tradition. The title translates to "The Lion That Devours All Principles." It functions as a methodological weapon, a systematic guide for dismantling the logical flaws in rival philosophies. Skeptics used these arguments to challenge orthodox priests in public squares. They demanded empirical proof for any supernatural claim. By forcing religious authorities to defend their dogmas against rigorous logic, these materialists forced Indian philosophy as a whole to become more analytical. A millennium later, in 1578 CE, these ideas began to migrate out of the subcontinent. Emperor Akbar hosted interfaith debates here at Fatehpur Sikri. Among the clerics and scholars invited to the royal table were Charvaka atheists, who argued their materialist views in front of the emperor. Visiting European Jesuits recorded these atheistic debates and sent detailed accounts of the arguments back to Europe in their letters. Decades later, the French traveler François Bernier documented similar philosophies during his time in India. His accounts reached Western intellectual circles, including philosophers like David Hume, who later developed similar theories on empiricism. This map tracks that intellectual transmission. These ancient Indian arguments circulated among Western scholars over a century before the peak of the Enlightenment. These records of these travelers suggest the European Enlightenment drew from a clandestine transmission of Indian skepticism. Despite their global impact, the Charvakas remained a ghost in the historical record well into the 20th century. Orthodox historians continued to view them primarily as fools. That changed in 1959, when philosopher Devi Prasad Chattopadhyaya published his academic work, Lokayata. Chattopadhyaya analyzed the hostile sources piece by piece, successfully resurrecting the Charvaka legacy and restoring them as early pioneers of rationalism. The Charvaka school survived millenniums of active suppression and the burning of their books. Their ideas survived because they were recorded in the very texts written to condemn them, persisting entirely on the power of their logic. The pursuit of empirical reason and a material understanding of the universe flourished in the public squares of ancient India 26 centuries ago.